about to have today help to inform and educate the people of Texas about the issues that are in play and the stakes they have in the outcomes of those issues. We think of this as a public service. We're trying to raise a level of civic engagement. We want you to know the people who are in political office or who are candidates for political office, and we want you to have a better sense of the process that affects your lives. This is part of that. We appreciate you being here and being a part of it in our audience. These events are free to attend. They're not free to put on. And so we have sponsors who support our ability to take these events on the road, to do them here in Austin, and to make the content available to everybody. I want to acknowledge the generous sponsors who support our series of events here and elsewhere. AT&T, BP, PepsiCo, Walmart, and Southwest Airlines are all sponsors of the Tribune's events. Could you acknowledge them, give them a hand, and thank them for their generous support? As well, any of you who are members of the Tribune, you know we're a nonprofit news organization similar to your PBS or NPR station back home, supported by citizens. Citizen-supported means that we do this work entirely with you in mind, and members make it possible for us in part to do this. So if you're a member of the Tribune, we thank you very much for that. If you're not, we're more than happy to sign you up on the way out. Rebecca Quarles would be happy to sign you up as a member, give you a Texas Tribune baseball cap or reporter's notebook to take away, and we'd be happy to have you be part of this little family of people around Texas who've, as I said, almost 8 years now doing the work that the Texas Tribune has done. If you're not a member, you get to come to our events, and so I want to tell you, whether you are one or not, about some things that we have coming up. Next weekend, the Big Texas Tribune Festival, the annual 3-day ideas conference that we do on the University of Texas at Austin campus. 260 people will speak over the 3 days, including one named Huffines, although not this one. Although he looks a lot like this one, actually. We'll have thousands of people attend this festival as attendees, more than 60 one-hour programs on all the big topics. We have a lot of national political figures who are coming in to be part of this event. I can assure you it is the only event in these United States in 2017 that has both Al Franken and Ted Cruz on the program. So we look forward to having those two along with a bunch of other folks with us next weekend here in Austin. TexasTribune.org/festival. You can still buy tickets, and in fact, I think there's a discount ticket code on your table. If you decide you want to go online, you can get 10% off the ticket price. We will be on October 23rd on the campus of Lone Star College in the Woodlands with Senator Brandon Creighton, Representative Tom Oliverson, debriefing the regular and special legislative sessions looking ahead to the elections. We'll be on the Texas Tech campus in Lubbock on November the 3rd with Senator Charles Perry, Representatives Dustin Burrows and John Frullo, all of whom represent the Lubbock area. Same, talking about the regular and special legislative sessions, looking ahead to next election cycle. We expect to have a number of events here at the Austin Club that we can announce soon, including one at the end of the month that we hope within a day or so we can announce. And if you look on the website, TexasTribune.org/events, you will be able to keep up with everything we have on the calendar and hope that you will think about attending. Phones to silent, please, so that we're not disturbed in the middle of this event. We do have a live stream going, and so out of respect for the people who are watching at home, please turn your phones to silent. If you want to tweet about this event, as people tend to do here, we're more than happy to have you do that. The hashtag is TT Events. We'll do about 35 to 40 minutes of conversation, balance of time questions from the audience. Agnes will walk a microphone around, and we'll ask that you put your hand up, and we'll be happy to take your question. And then at 9 o'clock, we'll let you all go. Okay? Appreciate your being here so much. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce this morning's guest, Phillip Huffines, a candidate for the Republican nomination in the race to represent Senate District 8. He will face, at a minimum, we don't know who else will get in this race yet, guidance counselor Angela Paxton in the March 2018 primary. Mrs. Paxton has been invited to sit for an interview here at the Austin Club as well. Just wanted to say that, and we hope that she'll say yes at some point during the primary. Mr. Huffines hopes to succeed Senator Van Taylor, the incumbent, who's stepping away from the legislature to run for an open congressional seat. He's the co-owner of Huffines Communities, a real estate company he founded with his brother Don, the state senator from District 16, and he's a minority owner of Huffines Auto Group, his family's dealership business. He's also the chair of the Dallas County Republican Party. He was overwhelmingly elected to that position by precinct leaders last August. A fifth-generation Texan born in Dallas, Mr. Huffines has an undergraduate degree from the University of Texas at Austin. Please join me in welcoming Phillip Huffines. Sir, good to see you.
Thank you, Evan.
Appreciate you being here. Yes, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. So why you? I know your family has been involved with politics for many years, and the Metroplex, well-known brand name on businesses all over the community. People know the Huffines name. And until the time that you ran for the chair of the Republican Party, you were involved with politics, but you were not actually seeking to be in politics yourself. So what about this race and what about this moment made you decide to get in?
Well, there's several answers to that question, but before we get to that, Evan, and I will get to that, I want to make sure that the audience knows my political philosophy and what motivates me, because I think that's important.
Well, yeah, I mean, in some ways, that's an answer to the question, too.
It is?
Yes.
Okay, well, I've always been passionate about liberty, freedom, the Constitution, American exceptionalism, Texas exceptionalism, ever since I was a child. And so it's kind of like in my DNA. It's just part of who I am.
Right.
And so I think it's important to also state what my political philosophy is. Okay? I strongly believe that our freedom and our liberty comes from God and not from the government. So the main role of government is to preserve and protect our individual liberties and freedom.
Okay.
And now, and really kind of back to your question, I vividly remember when I was a child, and we would sit around the family table for dinner, and my father would say, he'd sit back and he'd say, "Boys, the community's been good to us. You have to always give back." And I remember those words very vividly. And then when he passed away in 2009, those words got stronger in my head. And we would always do that. And the Huffines have always given back to the communities for decades.
So from your perspective, running for this office is not about you. It's about giving back to the community that's been good to you over the years.
I'm a successful businessman. I've got a lot of opportunities.
Well, you've heard probably the pay is great in the legislature. So
yes, yeah, that's $7,500.
That's about the most unselfish thing you could do, is to take that check.
Well, actually, I won't take that check. And that's
well, in fact, you and your brother both.
That's right, and that's I think it's important to point that out. I'm glad you mentioned that.
That $7,200 a year is going to solve the school finance problem, I'm sure.
You know, Don and I will be the only two legislators that do not, as far as I know, he's the only one now, and I will be the second when I win this election, that don't take any compensation from the state or the government. And the reason for that is important. It's not just that $7,200. It's because I don't work for the government. I work for the people.
Yeah.
And my door is always open. I'm always there to hear new ideas.
Right.
And so I'm not beholden to the state. I'm only beholden to the people. They're my employer.
Right. Now, when people run for office for the first time, they do it for a variety of reasons.
Right.
Some run because they have an agenda that they want to put forward. Some are concerned about the person in the seat previous.
Okay.
And the work that they did. You know, we've had a number of people over the years. We have a couple coming up in this cycle. People who are dissatisfied with the work of the person in office, and so they seek to defeat an incumbent of their own party. Now, you have Van Taylor in the seat now. He's getting ready to run for Congress. He's one of the most conservative members of the legislature. Are you concerned in any way about the work that Van Taylor did as senator? Are you running as a reaction to him? Help us understand your feelings about the person in the seat now.
Sure. Senator Taylor's been a great senator. He's a strong conservative, and I've got some big shoes to fill. Yeah. And I'm going to do that. So, so absolutely, I'm excited about being.
You want to continue the work as a senator. Are there any issues on that you can imagine where you and Senator Taylor don't agree?
Well, I don't know 100% of his issues, of exactly how he's voted on every single issue, but I can't imagine.
But nothing stands out.
No.
So if you get elected in that district, people can expect effectively, you know, a continuation of the Van Taylor. Yeah,
that's correct. Strong conservative leadership.
Right. Now, as I said, there are races on the primary ballot already. They're shaping up. Cindy Burkett versus Bob Hall, Pat Fallon versus Craig Estes, Mike Cannon and Victor Leal versus Kel Seliger, where the dividing line between the challenger and the incumbent, at least in the mind of the challenger, is ideology. Now, this is going to be an open seat. I mentioned Mrs. Paxton, who is your challenger at the moment. There may be more, but at the moment it's the two of you. She is not, say, a liberal or a moderate in the minds of a lot of people. She's certainly not positioning herself as that, but no one has argued that the problem with Mrs. Paxton in this race is that she's not conservative. This seems like a race shaping up between two conservatives. Would you agree with that? Unlike those other races?
Right, sure.
Yeah.
But, you know, I can only speak for myself.
Right.
And I'm a businessman and a strong conservative. Right. Believe in limited government. And what I really want to point out, what's important I've been campaigning for, 6 months? Right. Every single day. I'm out talking to voters. I've knocked on tons of doors. And I'm talking to voters, finding out what's important to them. Yeah. And, you know, one of the issues that keeps coming up is the economy and jobs and keeping Collin County prosperous. You probably know this, but Dallas-Fort Worth created 131,000 jobs in 2016, job generator of the whole United States. Right. And Collin County is a big part of that. So and they talk to me, the voters do, and they tell me how important it is to have a businessman in the Senate. They want someone like myself who signed thousands of paychecks, created hundreds of jobs over my business career.
So they like your experience. They think your experience is a feature and not a bug as it relates to this race.
Well,
so of course, I asked you about Mrs. Paxton, and I'm wondering if in saying that what the people of my district like is my experience, that you're suggesting that somehow her experience does not make her fit for that position. I'm going to make you talk about her. So your consultants may have told you, redirect him, answer the question you wish he asked. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm going to make you answer the question.
My brother told me you would keep pushing it.
Yeah, I mean, I do want you to talk about her because, when she got in this race, your campaign definitely reacted strongly to her presence in this race. It is seen by a lot of people outside the district as a battle of titans, right? I mean, you two are both significant figures with familiar names. It is a significant primary battle, and I want to understand how you assess the competition. I mean, look, if you're selling a car or you're selling a home, you're doing it not in a vacuum. You're assessing the competition. I want you to assess the competition in this case.
Okay. Well, I'm a businessman, as you know. And competition, just like an athlete, when we get competitors, we rise, we perform better, right? We rise to the occasion.
So you're happy to have the challenge?
I'm happy to have a challenge.
Right.
I've always expected there to be a lot of challenges in this race. Heck, it's an open seat. Filing deadline's not till December. There's no telling who else
it's a free country, anybody can get it.
Absolutely. And competition's okay with me. And my message that I like to get out is what I like to focus on. I don't know what their message is or what they're saying.
Mr. Huffines, is she qualified to be the senator from Senate District 8?
Evan, you're just going to keep
that
pinning me
pause
down.
is 9 months pregnant. Come on, man. Is she qualified or isn't she qualified to be the senator from Senate District 8?
Well, let me just tell you that I can't. The answer is not that simple because that's not what my campaign's about. It's not about personalities. My campaign is about the issues that are important to the voters in SD-8, and that's what I'm focused
Mr.
on.
Huffines, if your candidacy is not about personalities, why is it that on the day that Mrs. Paxton announced, your campaign put out a note saying, we look forward to running against Mrs. Ken Paxton? Why did you reduce Mrs. Paxton's candidacy to that of a wife? Why did you not comment on her or react to her as a person in her own right if it's not about personalities?
Well, once again, I didn't personally make that comment. That was something that came from the campaign, as you said.
Mr. Huffines, you own your campaign. Your campaign is you. You're your campaign. Mm-hmm. You're blaming it on staff? That's the second time that's happened this week.
I'm sure it wasn't you that did that.
No, I mean, I'm asking seriously. So you do not intend to litigate this race against Mrs. Paxton as somebody's wife? Are you going to run against her in her own right?
My job is to make sure that I communicate with voters. I know what's important to the voters, and I know what the issues are in this campaign, and that's what I'm focused on.
Do you have a problem with Ken Paxton, the Attorney General?
Look, I just assumed when I got in this race that the Paxtons would support me. I have supported them for many years.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going. So you're a supporter of the Attorney General.
I have been for many years.
Right. You're a Highland Park guy, or were before. Mr. Paxton ran against a Highland Park guy, Dan Branch, for the Attorney General office in Texas. When it was a Branch versus Paxton primary, did you support Mr. Branch, your fellow Highland Parker, or did you support Mr. Paxton?
At that time, I supported Mr. Paxton. So
you did?
Yep.
So you've been on Team Paxton at least as far back?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, at that point. And you have no problem with him. Do you intend to make Mr. Paxton or any of Mr. Paxton's recent legal troubles an issue in this race as you run against Mrs. Paxton?
I'm only going to run a positive campaign talking about the issues. But I'd like to say this. No, that's all right. No, I answer your question.
Yeah, you're not going to. So the Paxton family will not be an issue as far as you're concerned in this race.
No, it's the issues.
Okay, very good. However you intend to run against Mrs. Paxton, we know how she intends to run against you. She's telegraphed that. Just as on the day that she got in, your campaign made a statement. Her campaign has been very clear in telegraphing early on that they intend to paint you as a carpetbagger and an opportunist. Somebody who only recently moved into this district, moved from Highland Park to Richardson. Although you have said very strongly, the Huffines family and I personally have roots in this community that go back almost 100 years. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I do live in the district.
Yeah.
And once again,
moved to the district when, so we're clear? Moved there?
Well, in the district last spring.
In the spring. So, and moved for the purpose of running?
No, well, look, it's not that simple.
Well, would you have moved to the district if you hadn't run for the Senate?
It's just not that simple. The My roots go back for over 90 years
Yeah.
in Collin County. My
Yeah.
family's been active in business in Collin and Denton County in this area for over 90 years.
Yeah.
And I want to point this out. My father had a farm on a little 2-lane gravel road that's now a 6-lane boulevard when I was young and when I was a child. I spent many of my summers and many of my weekends and activities on that farm in Collin County, learning what I call my Texas values, how to ride a horse, how to hunt, and how to fish. And then my very first business I ever opened, Evan, was when I was 18 years old in high school and in college, was a fireworks stand. And it was on a little 2-lane asphalt road.
Yep.
That's now an 8-lane freeway, Highway 121. And my entire business career for the last 30 years, I've been building and developing in Collin County, helping build the infrastructure. I've seen Collin County mature from a small rural communities to urban mecca that it is today.
Yeah. So you feel connected enough to the community that you could say to people when you knock on doors, although I'm not from Collin County, although I wasn't living in Collin County, I'm connected enough to Collin County that this is my home. You feel strongly.
Where I lay my head and sleep is not that important. What happens is, what do I know about the communities? I know their needs. I know that what the community how it functions. I know all of the different towns. And so, yeah, that's my home.
Can you understand why some people might look at someone who moved into a district to run for a political office with some suspicion? Can you understand that?
No. What's important are the issues facing the voters. And I talk to voters, and that issue doesn't come up.
It does not come up.
It does not come up.
Only perhaps from the other campaign.
Correct. That's only, it doesn't come up.
So let's say Representative Jeff Leach from Plano, who you know was looking at running in this district at one point for the Senate. Let's say he decided, I really do want to run for the Senate. I'm going to move into Highland Park and run against Don Huffines or run against whomever for the Senate. Would you have a problem with somebody doing that?
No.
And do you think that the voters of that district would feel well represented by that person who's made that decision?
I can't talk for other voters or what they think,
Right.
but I can just tell you what I experienced. Like I said, I've been campaigning for 5 months, and I've been at a lot of doors, and I know what's important to them. It's border security, health care, getting rid of, repealing Obamacare, property taxes, making sure that Collin County continues with its excellent education. We've got a great education system in Collin County. The state needs some help in that. And once again, it's more about having leadership in the Senate that is effective businessmen, someone who knows what they're doing to get things done.
So on this question of the Senate, let me ask you about that. You're seeking to join a body that is 31, led by the Lieutenant Governor, the presiding officer of the Senate, who's a statewide elected official. Assess for us how the Senate has done. You've obviously watched closely, not just because your brother's there, but you're somebody who, as you say, is interested in this stuff. Do you think the Senate has done a good job? Do you think the Lieutenant Governor's done a good job?
I'm a big fan of the Lieutenant Governor and the way the Senate's operated the last 2 sessions.
Is the Senate sufficiently conservative in its disposition?
Yes, I think the Senate's doing a great job in its conservative presentation.
You know that the Lieutenant Governor and some members of the Senate, including your brother, have been frustrated because the Senate has wanted to get a bunch of things done, a bunch of agenda items that came up at the beginning that, in fact, did not ultimately get passed into law signed by the governor. Why do you think that is?
Well, there's always different viewpoints on any particular issue.
Right.
But, you know, as a businessman, over my career, I have to always take into account many different viewpoints and build a coalition. You see, to be a successful business person, the individual has to have a vision or a goal.
Right.
And you have to really laser focus on that goal and then build a team around it, a coalition to get it accomplished and break that goal down into little small steps, just like climbing a mountain.
And you have to work with everybody if you make a deal, right? Sometimes you have to concede some points in making a deal to the customer. Maybe you reduce the price of a car or you reduce the price of a home. Or if you're in politics, sometimes you have to work with the other side in a way where you give something to the other side, right?
In answer to your question, yes, as long as I don't sacrifice principle.
Core principles. So, you know, we've had a lot of attention to the president over the last couple of weeks, where the president has made deals with Democrats, and that has driven some people in the Republican Party and some people in the president's base bananas. My question is, if you, the businessman, similar to the president who ran as a businessman and said, I'm good because I have a business background, you get into the Texas Senate, will you be working with Democrats? Will you be working with members of the House? That's a big tension point between the House and the Senate at the moment to make those kinds of deals. Is that where your business background leads you politically?
As far as making deals, look, if there's a common goal and a common objective, I think that we can get there as long as it doesn't sacrifice my core principles.
principles.
Right. If the common objective, like in the special session, when there's this interim study on school finance, which is taking it from the ground up, and there's 3 senators and 3 House members on that committee, you look, if there's a common objective, I would excel in that arena, in that area, because it's about building a team and working for the common objective. And that's, yes, to answer your question, I can certainly get that done, but you can count on me to stay committed to my principles.
Yeah. Fundamentally, though, there's nothing wrong with working with people who disagree with you.
No, I can work with Democrats, Republicans, certainly no problem. The question is finding out if they have the same common goal.
Right. Now, how do you think your brother has done in the Senate? Is there any way for you to be objective in talking about Don?
Well, of course I can be objective. We're probably each our biggest critics, to tell you the truth.
Okay. So what's your biggest criticism of your brother's time in the Senate?
That he's not at the office more, making money.
Okay. I didn't expect that answer. Okay. Do you think has he behaved as a senator for District 16 as the conservative you've known him to be?
Absolutely. I'm very proud of my brother.
Right.
I'm very proud of his voting record
right.
and being one of the most conservative senators.
Now, you know, so the thing about your brother, from those of us on the outside observe him, is he's not every conservative's conservative. You know, he has kind of a libertarian bent to him. He was the statewide campaign chair for Rand Paul during the presidential campaign, at least early on. Senator Paul, who is himself kind of an unusual conservative in some respects, has already been to the district to do an event for you. He's a supporter of yours and also of your brother's. Can you go a little more granular in terms of where your political philosophy leads you? Similar to your brother, he has been more of a libertarian conservative than a traditional movement or grassroots conservative. Are there libertarian aspects to your political philosophy? I suspect the voters of your district would want to know if that's the case.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what that means, libertarian philosophy, but I can tell you this. I'm a social conservative. I strongly, strongly believe in life. And also, my values are similar to Don's. We're twins, so we, obviously think quite a bit alike. We're both very conservative, but I'm very independent. I look at things from my perspective. I got a strong personality, and I will be my own person. And I think here's a test. When bills or legislation when I'm reading it or reviewing it and making a decision on whether to support the amendment or the bill, it's got to pass a few tests. Number one, is it constitutional? Number two, does this benefit all Texans, right? Number three, does it make the individual more accountable so that they can be more successful, more accountable to their own decisions, right? And number four, does it limit government or restrain government? And that's where I'm coming from on legislation that comes.
I want to come back to this libertarian thing, but something you said caught my ear. You want to only pass legislation that is constitutional. How will you know if something is constitutional at the time you're debating it? There have been a number of pieces of legislation that have passed the legislature over the last couple of sessions that have been litigated subsequently in the courts and found not to be constitutional. Well, so how do you know at the time that you're debating something whether it's going to pass that test?
Well, unfortunately, there's quite a few bills that are clearly unconstitutional, right? Like, hey, the government has no authority in this area. Right. So those immediately kicked out. Yeah. Whether it's a gray area, that's for the courts to decide. Yeah. But it's also for me to decide well, how do I interpret the Constitution?
Do you view it as passing that test?
Yes, my test.
And then what happens subsequently, we'll see about.
That's
so
correct.
Back to this libertarian question. My point on Senator Paul, and to some degree on your brother, is that occasionally libertarian conservatives break with traditional conservatives on certain issues. Senator Paul on foreign policy has not always cut the same way as the rest of the Republican Party, for instance. I just wonder if there are any issues on which you, given your philosophy, might see yourself as not in lockstep with the Republican Party, or might not be in lockstep with conservatives. Helpful to know that on the front end of an election.
Sure, that's a legitimate question.
Yeah.
Look, the Republican Party has 250, 260 platform planks.
Yes.
Each one of those in the convention was voted on independently.
Right.
I'm 100% behind everything in the Republican Party platform. I've always been a Republican my entire life. I've never been associated with the Libertarian Party, if that's what you're asking. So I've been active in Republican politics from the time I was 18 and helped Ronald Reagan get elected, then worked in the Bill Clinton's campaign here in Austin when I was at UT in 1978. Right.
You were a Republican when a lot of Republicans were conservative Democrats.
That is correct. In
right.
fact, my father and mother were both Democrats. So I switched parties, so to speak, in the family.
Got it. One more question about the Senate before we talk about some of these issues that you'll deal with. So if I'm doing the math of the Senate correctly, 31 members of the Senate, 20 Republicans currently. It will take 19 Republicans, according to the way that the Senate operates currently, to bring up a bill. If there are 2 Huffineses in the Senate, then there's kind of a Huffines block or a Huffines caucus by default. The Huffines brothers could bring the business of the Senate, if they wanted to a halt, if there's a Huffines block. Is there any reason to be concerned about that? I mean, I know this is not unprecedented. There have been brothers serving together in the legislature. Currently, we have the Bonin brothers in the House. But should anybody be concerned that if you get elected, that the Huffines brothers have the ability, through the Huffines caucus, to bring the business of the Senate to a halt?
Well, I take exception to that. I haven't heard that. I don't think that's necessarily true that we could have.
It's absolutely true.
But it's no different than Van Taylor. Senator Taylor and Don, I think, voted lockstep in almost every piece of legislation. So as a conservative, once again, I have my own independent voice and a very strong personality. Right. And I might not support 100% of the time what my brother does.
Right.
So it's no different than having 2 strong
conservatives. Of course, you are running very consciously as 2 for the price of 1. You did put out a video last week of 4 minutes or more that was like the beginning of the old 3.5. That was like the beginning of the old Patty Duke show. I mean, this... You guys did play the twin card pretty hard. Now you say, well, I'm not going to vote the same as him. But I didn't say that. I didn't say I wouldn't vote the same as him. Right.
I'd say that I would make my own decisions.
Independent. So the twin thing notwithstanding, there's no reason to think about the brothers.
Look, we're both strong conservatives.
Okay. So let's talk about some issues that are going to be before you, and in fact, some things that were controversial during the last session, and as I alluded to, some things that were on the conservative agenda but may not have actually gotten through. Senate did not ultimately accomplish a reduction in property taxes, or at least a rethinking of the property tax mechanism to involve voters. Where do you come down on that?
Well, property taxes, as you know, go up every single year. And it's not through the tax rate. It's just because the assessed valuations continue to increase. We've been very fortunate in Texas. Home values have gone up tremendously, like 10% a year. Commercial properties the same. So everyone's paying 10%, 8% more in property taxes unless the rate is lowered by the taxing entities, and there's a group of those, at least 5 in each county. Right. What's happening is that the taxing entities are not lowering their tax rate enough to make up for the difference in the increase in assessed valuation. So where I come on that is property taxes need to come down. It's one of the #1 issues I hear when I'm talking to voters and knocking on doors.
Of course, you as a senator can't lower the property taxes because there is no statewide property tax, right?
That is correct.
Right. So what should the reform of the property tax system be?
I think the Lieutenant Governor's proposal was a good one, to keep the cap, the rollback rate from 8% to 4% and not require a petition, but just allow it to be automatic, that if the taxing entity raises the rollback rate more than 4%, then there can be an automatic voter approval, which is local control. We talk about local control. That's what we need.
But of course, as you know, Mr. Huffines, many communities are concerned that if the property tax rate is capped, or if in any way the amount of revenue available to those communities through the property tax is reduced, that services in that community will be adversely affected.
Well, of course that's what they're going to say.
Right. So you think that actually communities that rely on the property tax revenue that exists now to pay for crucial services will just have to figure out how to do it without that money?
Well, let's put it this way. The rollback rate includes inflation and population growth and the effective rate. So you take out all of the high rises that are being built, you take out all of the extra commercial growth that's occurring, the extra new houses that occurred that year and the previous year, and you take all of that out of the equation. So all of that money comes in and is not part of the rollback rate. So if you look at the total revenue that each local government or each entity, property tax entity is receiving, it's significantly increased, more so than the population growth.
And you think it's too high?
More so than population growth and more so than inflation. So at what point do we limit it? Like the budget, for the last Texas budget was a great conservative budget because it did not go up as much, or it limited itself to population growth plus inflation.
Plus inflation.
Yeah, what's wrong with that? I mean, that seems to be a very valid
So the property tax conversation has been linked, Mr. Huffines, directly to the school finance conversation. The idea that somehow the state is now taking on less of a percentage of the overall spend on public education, and that has been kicked to a degree, in the minds of some, too much of a degree, down to the local residents, and it's reappeared in the form of property taxes, that the property taxpayers are paying now too much of a burden on public ed. Where do you come down on the question of money in public schools? Do we need to spend more money on public education? Obviously, this was, again, something that the legislature debated incessantly over both the special and the regular sessions, could not come to a plan on what to do about school finance. What would the Huffines plan be?
Well, it's an excellent question, and that's why I brought up earlier one of the interim charges in the special session, why I was excited about it. Because, Evan, school financing is broken. It's been broken for decades. We patch it in each legislative session with a little patch here, like the $200 million that was just allocated to the teachers' health care, and the $200 million that was allocated to some districts that were going broke that the special session just allocated. We got to quit patching the system. We need to look at the entire school finance, how they're financed, what is it we're achieving, and the results of education.
Right. You know, the criticism of the interim charge really go back to the criticism of the item on the call was, we've studied school finance and studied school finance and studied school finance. What the state doesn't need to do is study school finance more. It needs to fix school finance. What do you think about that?
It needs to fix school finance, and that's what this charge was, in my opinion,
right,
should be and should come out as a result of that charge. Let's fix school finance, right? And I want to be clear. I don't believe that more money thrown at a problem is the way to fix it. I think that the money should somehow be allocated to the parents, right? Mm-hmm. So that parents are more involved in the schools, in the selection of schools, and the education of their children.
Allocated to the parents, Mr. Huffines, how? In what form?
Well, the Lieutenant Governor had a proposal where the enrollment is more open, and that the allocation of what the state is spending is to the child, school choice. Look, we've got 140,000 plus kids waiting that need help today, waiting to get in charter schools.
Right.
So, look, as a businessman, I know this about competition. Competition improves the quality and lowers the price of everything it touches. I also know this. Monopolies do not provide good quality service with a low price, and government monopolies are no exception.
So when pushback against the school choice conversation during the session from some was,
yes,
we don't think vouchers are the answer, and that ultimately supporting a voucher program as far as it goes will diminish or detract from the public education system. That is one view of this conversation. Would you consider yourself pro-voucher?
Yes.
You are?
Yes.
And so you believe that the plan that the Senate put forward in the area of school choice this last session was one that you would be comfortable with. Had you been in the Senate, you would have been for it?
Yes, absolutely.
And you would want to see that come back up again next session?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you be willing, as the Lieutenant Governor said he was and seemed to be last session, to tie any school finance reform to the inclusion of school choice? He said to me about a year ago, no one without the other. And true to his word, as the Lieutenant Governor is, during the session, it was no one without the other. Would you want to tie those two issues together?
There is really nothing more important than making sure that our children get the very best education in the entire United States. That Texas excels in that. You know that. That's a common goal, right? So let's sit back and look at it. And yes, we need to make certain that the money that we as taxpayers spend, we are getting a good return on our investment. In some areas we are, some schools we are, and in some we're not. And a lot of that is driven by a lower income area. Mm-hmm. So maybe some of the vouchers, as you call them, or maybe it's ESA accounts, or income derived. Yeah. Because rich people have opportunities to go to private school, right? And to avoid the government public schools. So let's maybe tilt it that way, just like the Lieutenant Governor wanted to do. Because look, you can't have one size fit all, because you have special needs children, right? Public schools aren't necessarily geared for that. They're very expensive. You know, it takes a lot of energy and focus because each special need is special. So maybe we take that money that the state is spending on those special needs and move it over to some other charter school or somebody who's focused on those needs.
So to come back, though, to the question, would you tie school finance reform to school choice necessarily?
I'd have to just look at the legislation and see how it's exactly written, but I'm a big fan of school choice.
Of school choice. Yeah. Do you believe the quality of public education in Texas, you talked at the very beginning about Texas exceptionalism.
Right.
Is the quality of public education offered today to the average family in Texas exceptional?
Exceptional?
Yeah.
I think we can always improve. Like I said, there are some areas of the state and some school districts that do an excellent job.
Right.
And I think a lot of our top performing students do perform very well throughout the country, wherever they go.
Yeah.
But the goal is to bring everybody up. See, my goal, one of my goals in the Senate is to make sure that every Texan achieves the American dream. And I'm going to define that for you.
Okay.
That's being successful through hard work and education. That's where all our forefathers came here. That's what social mobility is, what makes America great and what makes Texas great. So it's imperative that that every individual has the opportunity to reach their highest potential, to succeed or fail.
And do you think the system is enabling that right now? I guess that's the question.
I think it can always be better. It's like any business.
Yeah.
Can I be better at my business? Of course. Can we work harder? Of course. Can we get a better team? Yes. It's always that way.
Speaking of your business and speaking of business, I went onto your Twitter feed yesterday because I was interested to see issue positions that you had taken, comments on the news. It's always good fodder for a conversation like this one. And I saw that you had an image in which you said, eliminate the margins tax. Speaking of business, there's been an effort over the last 2 sessions to reduce the margins tax, but you used the word eliminate the margins tax. Do you believe that the state should eliminate the margins tax all at once, immediately in the next legislative session? If you were in there, would you be a vote for eliminating the margins tax?
Yes, I would vote to eliminate the margins
completely.
Tax. Phasing in, phase it out.
So phase it out.
It would have to. It depends on the budget.
Right.
We have to look at from the comptroller, see how much revenue is coming in,
right.
How is the phasing occurring, and how are we and when we reduce those revenues, how are we reallocating the funds that are available.
Right. You understand that the reduction of the margin tax in its entirety would create a hole in the budget of $4 or more billion.
Well, I think it's a little less now because we're already reducing it 20. We already reduced it 25%. So it's say $3 or $4 billion. Yeah, there is
significant.
Yeah, it is significant.
More than.
So maybe a phase out is the way to go.
Right.
But we need to get rid of taxes, margins tax, for a couple of reasons. One, it's an unfair tax on businesses. And we want to make sure that Texas is the place where every business wants to relocate to, right? So we want to get rid of as many business taxes as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you about something else I saw on your Twitter feed last night. We need to end career politicians in Austin. We have to get rid of career politicians. That sounds like somebody who is for term limits. Are you for term limits, Mr. Huffines?
I'm glad you asked that question. Because I wanted to bring that up.
I don't mean this interview. I don't mean ending the interview, like a term limit on the interview. I meant in office. Are you for term limits?
Absolutely, I'm for term limits.
Okay,
for
so
everyone.
How many terms will you limit yourself to should you be elected next year?
3 terms, 12 years.
Okay, 3 terms, 12 years. So what if you drew a 2-year term at some point in the future? What would you do about that? You know that you draw lots.
Oh, I didn't know. I haven't thought of that, about drawing a lot for a 2-year term.
But basically, you're saying 12, you want to call it 12 years?
Yeah, I think that's enough for
So
anybody.
we'll memorialize it, 12 years and out. That's the...
I think it should be for everybody. Look, the way that the government comes back to the people and people get control of government is not through career politicians. Okay. It is through elected officials that come back home and live in the community, work in the community, and learn what's important to the community, and then go back into government and to implement those concerns.
Okay. Let me ask you one more question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. On immigration, we poll all the time. Immigration and related matters are near the top or at the top of the concerns of so many voters in Texas and voters in this country. Obviously, immigration is a big topic of conversation in every statewide election, and we're going to have a whole bunch of them next year, so we expect to hear a lot about immigration, border security, and all that. And at the national level, whether it's a border wall or the rescinding of DACA, we hear a lot about that as well. Can you talk about your position on immigration?
Sure.
And how you believe the Texas Senate should be dealing with this issue?
Well, I think the Texas Senate is doing an excellent job in dealing with this issue. Look, Texas spends around $400 million a year on extra border patrols with the DPS and securing the border.
Correct.
Securing the border continues to be a high priority of mine and the voters and the constituents in SD-8. Okay. It's very, very important.
Right.
So the best thing that the Senate can do and the state of Texas can do is continue doing what it's doing and encourage the Trump administration and encourage Washington and help them as much as possible in getting a wall built. If we can secure the border and get a wall built, we can save a lot of money. We can save maybe $200 million, some large amount of money every single year that we're spending taking care of the federal government's responsibility. And we need to make sure that the federal government takes care of their responsibility and secure the border.
So provided that the federal government does, as you say, and steps up, you would be willing to spend less out of the Texas budget, would want to spend less out of the Texas budget on border security?
No, I want to spend as much as it takes to secure the border,
Right.
period.
Right.
And what I'm saying
But
is...
I thought that, Mr. Huffines, I thought that the pitch to all of us here in the last two budgets was the federal government is not doing enough. And so until the federal government does enough,
That's correct.
we're going to spend what we spend. But the assumption has always been that when the federal government steps up, that we would actually be able to take some of that money and reallocate it to other things, or maybe give it back to the taxpayers or what have you.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But the federal government hasn't stepped up. They haven't secured the border. So I see the Senate and the state continuing to fund this $400 million a year to secure the border.
Mr. Huffines, you've built things for many years. You understand the challenges of building things. People say that one of the problems with the border wall is that as a practical matter, not as a political matter, there are a whole bunch of areas along the border where it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to build that wall. And in fact, in some cases, you're going to have to build it on the Texas side and possibly separate the land of people who have been there for generations, where half their property is going to be on one side, half's going to be on the other. What do you do about, as a builder, what do you do about the practical concerns that people have about the construction of this wall?
Well, many years ago, I got in a canoe and canoed that Big Bend Park and all the way down those areas. And I assure you, there's places where the wall really can't be built. In those places, you can't build it, so you use current technology, aerial surveillance or cameras or something else. And if we can't build the wall there, then most people aren't crossing there, right? So we need to focus on areas where the illegals are coming across, and build the wall in those areas. And look, one of the main purposes of government is infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, and security. And this is a security issue. We want to make sure that Texans are safe.
Okay. So one more question on, on immigration. As you know, the business community of the state of Texas has gotten activated. Well, they've been activated for some time, but in the last year, the business community has gotten activated, especially on a bunch of issues. Mm-hmm. And on the immigration issue particularly, whether it's the likes of Bob Perry and Charles Butt a couple of sessions ago, or the current leaders of businesses now, the business community seems to want the state of Texas, from an employment standpoint, from a workforce standpoint, to steer a more moderate course on immigration. As an employer, you run a successful real estate company. Do you employ undocumented labor in your business, Mr. Huffines?
No, of course not.
You don't. How do you know that you don't?
Well, the subcontractors, we deal with consultants. I only have about 15 employees.
Right. But do you know that your subs are not using undocumented labor, and then indirectly you're using undocumented labor?
Well, they report to us to that effect.
They report to your effect that they do not use undocumented labor.
That's correct.
Do you believe
Look,
that?
But I understand your point.
Yeah.
Look, there are a lot of undocumented workers in the state of Texas doing construction work. Everybody is aware of that, doing all kinds of work,
Absolutely,
right?
Yes.
But look, we have to seal the border and then take a look at our immigration policy from a federal standpoint. I think the last time it was really addressed was 1986 with Ronald Reagan, when we had a comprehensive immigration overhaul. Look, Texans and Americans are very compassionate. We allow 1.1 million legal immigrants into this country a year. Mm-hmm. So we need to make sure that if someone wants into this country, they do it in a legal manner.
Right. Are you concerned that any of the work being done at the federal level will somehow impact your workforce or the workforce of Texas now?
Whether it does or doesn't, what matters is it legal, is it right, is it the thing to do? And it is. The thing to do is to secure the border and then have the federal government come up with an immigration policy on how to deal with the workers who are here. Whether it's a visa, whether it's an 8-month visa, like that we do with the agriculture work, and they go back for 3 or 4 months. Right. But we've got to stop the magnets that are attracting all the illegals.
Would you be willing to implement an E-Verify program to ensure that the people who work for you are here with legal status?
Yes. In fact, we have E-Verify for state.
Right, but of course it does not yet extend to private businesses. And the question is whether, if we're concerned about undocumented labor or undocumented persons in this country, mm-hmm. one way to deal with that would be to attack the problem at the motivation for undocumented persons to be here, mm-hmm. which would be at the labor end of this, which would mean private businesses being put under the same umbrella. You'd be okay with that?
Yes, I'm for stronger E-Verify.
Very good. Okay. Let's take questions from the audience. Let me ask Huffines staffers not to ask "Aren't you awesome?" questions. Anybody have a question?
Good morning. Thank you so much for coming. I'm sorry I got a little bit triggered hearing the word illegal because I'm an immigrant. So it's something that I react to. As a businessman, what percentage of your profit in your company is dedicated to the health and wellness of your staff?
Okay, that's a good question. I know this. Our costs for healthcare continue to rise every single year. And in fact, in the last 3 years, it's almost doubled. For an employee with 3 children, or a family with 3 children, right now, my healthcare cost for that employee is around $18,000 to $20,000 a year. So healthcare is out of control. We've got to fix it. We've got to put healthcare back in the hands of the physician and the patient, and stop the regulation and the rationing by the federal and state government. So healthcare is a big issue. My employees get healthcare benefits. We have 401ks, savings plans, etc.
What is the state to do about this problem? You go into the Texas Senate. I'd love to know where you come down on what the state can and should do to solve the healthcare problem. This is really a federal issue, right? We need the federal government to deal with either fixing the Affordable Care Act or repealing it and replacing it.
Well, it's both.
What can you do?
Of course, it is a federal law and a federal issue, but the state, look, why are we not taking more initiatives? Why aren't we coming up as a state with more ideas on how to fix the problem, right? We, in our legislature, can come up with solutions and plans. Hopefully, we'll get block grants from the federal government so that we can implement our own plans, so that we can make sure that the marketplace is working to make sure that healthcare we're achieving the results that we want with the amount of money we are receiving.
You are for repeal
of Obamacare.
Of the Affordable Care Act, yes.
Yes, absolutely.
You are. So you know the state of Texas right now has 4.6 million people who have no health insurance, 17%. That is down from pre-Affordable Care Act, 6 million and 25%. There is concern in some states, and I assume in Texas in some quarters, that if the Affordable Care Act is repealed and there's not either a replacement immediately or an adequate replacement, that those uninsured numbers will go back up to the pre-ACA levels. Does that concern you?
Sure. We've got to take care of individuals that need taken care of, right? That's the role of the state. We're going to make sure that everybody is taken care of and has access to health care.
How are you going to do it?
One, we're going to get the federal government out of the way as much as possible and the state government out of the way as much as possible and let the marketplace work. Back in 1966, I think when LBJ just put it in place, Medicare, I think the health care expenditures per GNP was less than 10%. Now we're at 18%. And the reason for that is because the government is involved in the process. We need to somehow get government out and let the market work.
Okay. Other questions? Gentleman here in the front. I appreciate you skipping school to be here today.
He's at UT, I already talked to him.
Okay, that's good. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So a couple years ago, the Texas Supreme Court struck down a occupational license that they deemed too onerous. Do you think there's a problem with excessive occupational licensing in Texas?
Good question.
Yeah, good question. Thank you very much. Yes, licensing is usually used to limit competition by certain groups who come down and focus on that issue.
How far would you go on that? How much regulation is enough regulation or too much regulation? Where is your balance? I assume you don't want to go all Wild West on us here and have no regulation. So what is the appropriate balance?
Well, there is a balance, and it depends on the specific issue, the specific industry, the specific license. You know, the words health, safety, and welfare have been used in the Constitution to create all kinds of laws and all kinds of regulations. But I think it's just common sense. Is this a common sense approach to regulation? Is it really about limiting competition and increasing the price so that everybody pays more for a specific service? Or is it really about making certain that the public is protected?
You're not a big fan of government, Mr. Huffines, are you?
I believe in limited government. You're absolutely right. I believe in the individual.
Yeah.
I think individuals can make the right decisions.
I mean, it's always interesting to me and you're hardly the only person who's been in this situation. It's really interesting to me when somebody who's not a big fan of government wants to go into government, but wants to go into government to limit the thing that he wants to go into. That really is what you're trying to do, right?
Correct. I want to preserve everyone's individual liberties because that's the role of government.
You are the check on an overreaching government. That is your intent. That's
Yes.
what you're running to be, that check.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Any other questions? Over here. Sir.
I've got a quick question about, we talked about school finance and we talked about immigration, talked about the $400 million the state has to spend due to the federal government's lack of support for our immigration needs. I was just wondering how you feel about the message that from our alma mater, President Finvis sent to our president in support of the Dreamers. I'm just wondering if you feel that there's some type of mixed message through that and kind of where you shake out on that.
I can ask you about President Fenvis's position on DACA, or I can ask you about President Trump's position on DACA. What do you, have at it. What do you think?
Well, it is obviously a subject that touches everyone's heart because these children came here not by choice or with any knowledge they were really even moving. Some of them were here when they're 2 years old.
Yeah.
They don't even know where their parents came from as far as that village or that town or wherever. So it is an issue that we have to address, right? And I think that the president had a great proposal. He's kicked it back to Congress, and this is a federal issue, not a state issue.
Right.
But
apparently over egg rolls last night with Schumer and Pelosi, he decided that they're going to make a deal and keep these kids here.
Well, if that's what Congress decides, then that's the immigration policy.
Are you for that? Are you for allowing the DACA-eligible residents of Texas? There are 124,000, if I understand the numbers correctly, second only to California. We have the second highest DACA-eligible population. Are you for allowing DACA kids to remain in Texas, or would you like to see them go?
I think it depends on each individual situation. I don't know the
But you
answer.
have to have a policy. I mean,
Yeah, I think, that, like you said, the policy may be that in general, these individuals get to stay, and maybe some of these don't. I don't know the answer.
What about the concept of allowing undocumented students to pay in-state tuition rates? That has been a big topic of conversation in the Texas legislature for some time. That is currently the law of Texas, going back to when Rick Perry signed it into law in 2001. What do you say about that?
Well, I'm a big fan of Rick Perry. I think he's a great governor that Texas had. But I'm against in-state tuition.
Yeah, I heard a but coming. Yeah, so you're against in-state. You're against undocumented students paying in-state tuition
Correct.
rates. You are very good. Okay, gentleman right here. We'll make this the last one, sir.
We talk about waste in the legislature, and being a retired state employee, I got to see that for 25 years. How do you feel about the ability, because we had a special session purely because a pet project of some of the higher ranking officials in our government tacked it onto something that had absolutely nothing to do with the other? How would you feel about limiting the bill for licensing physicians and not being able to tack on a bathroom bill to that? Just
So you're talking about the call for the special session, which was ostensibly to come back to pass sunset legislation, but then the governor, as is his power, chose to add a bunch of items to the call.
It failed in the regular session because
Right.
people tacked on something totally dissimilar and caused us to have a special session because we have to have our doctor's license. And again, we won't go back into the licensing thing. But how would you feel about passing something our federal government would never dream of doing, saying dissimilar issues cannot be tacked on to the bills together? Because that creates a huge amount of waste in our legislature, and it keeps responsible things from being passed for things that some people would consider kind of frivolous.
What do you say about that?
Okay. Well, in order to tack on an amendment or some other bill to another bill, it needs to be germane.
Right.
And if there's two separate topics, then they shouldn't be attached together. But that would be up to the leaders to make that decision. But in answer to your question, if you're talking about the I think you're referring to the Privacy Act. Well, I'm all for the Privacy Act because I just do not think that we should have 16-year-old boys in our locker rooms with our 13-year-old daughters, bottom line, right?
It should have stood on its own, though.
Right, and have individuals vote it up or down so that they're accountable for their decisions. And that's important to make sure that there's transparency.
So if that legislation comes back up, Mr. Huffines, in the next session, as the Lieutenant Governor's indicated he intended for it to, you'd be for it?
Yes, sir.
And are you in any way sympathetic to the concerns of the LGBT community that this legislation, whatever its stated intent, ultimately discriminates against transgender Texans?
I don't think it does. I think that the purpose of the bill is to have it only affects government, state buildings, state agencies. It doesn't affect private businesses, so they can continue to do whatever they want to do.
Right.
And it just provides a uniform rule and regulation for all of the public school systems, right, on how to handle the situation. And look, we do not want 16-year-old boys in our locker rooms with our 13-year-old daughters, period.
All right, we could do an hour on that subject probably, but we're gonna stop there. Mr. Huffines, you have been a good sport. You know, I know you signed up to run for office. You didn't sign up for Mayweather McGregor, which is what today has been a little bit. I don't know which one of us was which. But I appreciate you doing this and answering our questions and being here for everybody. Thank you very much.
Evan, I want to thank you and thank you for your time. You do a great service to the state of
Good
Texas.
to see you. Thank you very much, Mr. Huffines. Appreciate it. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Look forward to having this opportunity again.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks.